Yo, what's up, man? Interesting events taking place. Put that down so we can promote the logo. The podcast was sold. Gumby Publishing, The Stigmatism in My Soul, and myself personally, Sean Xavier Gumby Sr. We do not wish to defame, libel, or slander anybody as it relates to this case that we're going to talk about today, which is the United States of America versus Dion Lamont Gatlin. This is the Franks hearing, dated January 9th, 2017. Keith Cromer is on the stand. Now he's being direct examined or cross examined by Welby. What's interesting about this is that whenever they ask Keith Cromer a question about specific events as it relates to what happened in the events that took place on August the 5th, 2012, or anything that happened in March, his answer is usually, I can't recall, I don't remember, possibly, maybe. If you have some kind of documentation to show me, maybe that'll refresh my memory. And I can partly understand that because we're talking January 2017. So we're talking about almost 5 years after the fact, right? But what makes me a little suspicious about his memory and his recollection is that in the process of him testifying, he's able to remember other events, minutia, with vivid memory. But whenever it comes down to specific events as it relates to this case and him and Tammy Cowins and whether he overheard the phone call with Suarez and Tammy Cowins, he can't remember. One specific instance highlighted in the testimony, and we'll get into that, Welby has all the receipts from his credit card that took place on August the 5th, 2012, right? Now, we know August the 5th, 2012 is a very important date. So Welby mentions that there's a credit card charge for Zaxby's near Augusta, Georgia on his credit card. And he says, yeah, I ordered a salad, right? So you can remember back what your specific order was, right? Because Welby says this was a chicken place, right? He says, yeah, I ordered a salad. He can remember that he ordered a salad 4.5 years ago, but whether he overheard Suarez and Tammy on a three-way or he can't, oh boy, he can't really remember that too well. Now, what Welby gets into right away is what I talked about on the last video, where Keith Cromer testifies that Welby says, listen, Mr. Cromer, before we get off these pictures, you testified originally that you thought this was your trip to Chattanooga because you went to Chattanooga, because when you went to Chattanooga, you shared a hotel room with Tammy Cowins, right? Remember in the Humphrey cross-examination, Humphrey referenced Chattanooga and then Cromer corrected him and says, no, it was Biloxi. Or did he change his testimony in the middle, says, no, it was Biloxi. They get into this right from the gate. They stay on here. About Tammy Cowins being with Keith Cromer on a trip to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Tammy Cowins being with Keith Cromer on a trip to Biloxi, Mississippi, where Keith Cromer pays for both hotel rooms. But he insists that his roommate let her in the room to take the picture of him sleeping in the bed and that he had no knowledge of that. But then Welby points out that, do you know that on both your cell phones, Keith Cromer has two cell phones, one with a 678 area code and one with a 404 area code, that when Keith Cromer calls her phone from either one of those cell phones, her profile picture tied to his number is him sleeping in the bed, right? They point that out in here. Welby, are you aware that this picture is linked to both your cell phones, your 404 cell phone and your 678 cell phone? Keith Cromer says no. This is page 137 of 192. Stephen Welby, are you aware that every time you call her, your picture sleeping in bed is the picture that she sees on her phone? Keith Cromer, no sir. You testified that you took this trip to Biloxi in March of 2012. Yes, sir. The same time this picture was taken, March of 2012. Yes, sir. Welby, you discussed March of 2012 in other contexts today, repeatedly stating that you plan to put CS1 and CS2 together to help catch Fidel, Suarez, and Cuff. All came together in March of 2012. Keith Cromer, yes, it came together. They met, CS1 and CS2 met each other in March of 2012. Welby, after the trip to Biloxi? Before the trip to Biloxi, yes. Welby asked him what day. What happened was in February 2012, while I was on my way back from Vanderbilt, there were some issues that came up, enforcement issues that came up dealing with CS2. And since CS1 had already expressed their concern in reference to Cuff, I decided to bring CS2 into the fold so that she could be the one who dealt with Cuff herself, and then CS1 would phase out. Now, what Welby also attempts to pin Cromer down on August the 5th, 2012. August the 5th, 2012 is a Sunday. It's a Sunday. Now, Tammy Cowins has testified earlier that she was at the house cooking spaghetti on August the 5th, 2012, and that Keith Cromer was there when the call came in from Suarez, and that he was there in the house, and that he heard her talk to Suarez on the speakerphone looking for Cuff, and that he had this truck up there. This is what Tammy Cowins testified to. But we later found out that that couldn't be possible because Keith Cromer was in Newberry, South Carolina, at a family reunion, right? Supposedly. Now, what Welby goes through in here, he starts to timestamp these credit card charges, these phone calls, and Cromer can't remember when Tammy Cowins called him that day, if he was on a three-way call with her, did he talk to the DEA that day? He can't remember none of that, what he told the DEA, but Welby has all of the receipts. He has all of the paperwork to back up what he's actually questioning Tammy Cowins about. Keith Cromer has an American Express account with 2 credit cards on there. And on this day, August 5th, 2012, there are multiple credit card charges on this American Express account on 2 separate cards. two separate American Express cards on the same American Express account. There's multiple charges on both of these credit cards. Now, Cromer says that he went to Newberry, South Carolina to this family reunion with his wife and kids. If that's the case, why would there be multiple charges on two separate credit cards on the same account? If you're with your wife and kids, you only need to use one credit card, right? Because you're with your family. But Welby is implying that that story, that Tammy Cowins went on that trip. Or that there was no trip. Right? I don't know what Welby is trying to flesh out here, but he's showing that why would you need two credit cards for a trip with your wife and kids? Your wife is charging stuff too on her card, But he never admits that Tammy Cowins went. He says he went alone. Let's get into it. Stephen Welby. Your activities in 2012, specifically around August the 5th, we talked about last time. You said that you went to Newberry, South Carolina. Is that right, Mr. Cromer? Yes, sir. Did Tammy Cowins go with you on that trip? Keith Cromer. No, sir. Did you go alone? Keith Cromer. No. Who did you go with? Keith Cromer. My wife and kids. Stephen Welby. So if there are multiple credit card charges on your American Express for two different cards, is that because you used one and your wife used one? Keith Cromer. Yes, sir. Stephen Welby. So obviously, if your wife was there and your kids were there, you didn't bring along CS1. Keith Cromer. Yes, sir. Stephen Welby. That would not have been appropriate, right? Keith Cromer. My wife had spoken with CS1 before and thanked her for speaking to me and counseling me on how to deal with my son's death. My wife didn't know she cooperated with the government, but she had spoken to her in reference to that. Stephen Welby. But Tammy Cowins certainly didn't go with you to the family reunion in Newberry, South Carolina. No, sir. Welby, so you're absolutely certain, as you sit here today, that you and Tammy Cowins were not together in the early afternoon hours or late morning hours of August the 5th, 2012? Yes, sir. Stephen Welby. And if Tammy Cowins testified that the two of you were together in her apartment, that would be false. Keith Cromer. Correct. And if we check your American Express receipts, there are 3 charges on one card and then 3 charges on another card. Keith Cromer. Okay. Stephen Welby. Is that possible? Keith Cromer says yes. Stephen Welby. Okay. Would it surprise you if those charges put you in Augusta, Georgia, in the Augusta, Georgia area, somewhere around 1:15 in the afternoon? Keith Cromer. That's about correct. And there is 2 charges at a Shell gas station around that time, and about 5 or 6 minutes later, there's a charge for Zaxby's, also in Augusta, Georgia. Keith Cromer. Yes, sir. Stephen Welby. Is that like a chicken place? It's a restaurant? Keith Cromer. I got a salad. Yes, sir. Stephen Welby. And there's no other charges until you get back to the Georgia area. There's a charge at 5:42 p.m. in Conyers, Georgia, and then 2 later that evening in McDonough, Georgia. So what Welby is trying to do is to I don't know where he's going with this thing. But I think what he's trying to say is that Tammy Cowins and Keith Cromer were together on August the 5th, 2012. Now, August the 5th, 2012, as we know from the motion to suppress, is the date that Suarez is calling and trying to find Cuff. And this is supposedly where Tammy puts Cuffy in touch with Suarez. And this information is used to get the affidavit and the Title III application for the wiretaps. So it's just real not good, man. It's just not good, man. He's got his phone numbers. They're asking him, Stephen Welby is asking Cromer, did you receive any phone calls from Tammy Cowins that morning? First he says, I don't know. Then later he says yes, because Stephen Welby shows him the phone records. Did you speak with DEA St. Louis on August the 5th? I don't know, I can't recall. Stephen Welby shows him the phone records. Oh yeah. Then he comes back and says, yeah, I did speak with them. Then he confirms that, yeah, I did overhear Suarez talking to her. It's just so much lying, man, and perjury going on from Tammy Cowins and Keith Cromer. Both of them, man, are just telling one story and then coming back later and just totally contradicting what they just said, man. And this is the groundwork, man, under which Cuffy was prosecuted. This type of judicial misconduct, man. This type of governmental misconduct. This type of perjury. These type of lies in these legal documents, man. It's just so bad, man. Then he talks about, you know, he talks about, you know, Meach and Welby asks him about the finder's fee for Big Meach for setting up Cuffy with Suarez or Suarez with Cuffy. And, you know, he says Tammy Cowins told him all of that. He told her she wasn't going to be able to do that. It's just not good, man. You know, and I'm gonna do the Frank's hearing of the St. Louis DEA agents too. I'm gonna be covering that soon. And one agent that they already cross-examined on the stand in the Frank's hearing, which I went over earlier, and I'm going to do him again. You know, he stated, man, that if I would have knew that, you know, they were having a relationship, there was an illicit relationship, I wouldn't have used none of what they said, none of their information, because I knew it would have got thrown out in court. Now, here's another interesting fact. Tammy Cowins gets put in. Keith Cromer puts her in for an $80,750 award after they come back from Biloxi, Mississippi. Now, Special Agent Swoop puts in this award for Tammy Cowins for $80,750 on the exact same day that supposedly Suarez is calling Tammy to try to get in touch with Cuff, August the 5th, 2012, which is a Sunday. And Welby asks him, don't you think that's a coincidence that on a Sunday, one of your subordinate employees is submitting an award for Tammy Cowins for $80,000 on a Sunday? And then they ask him, Welby asked him, did you tell St. Louis that Tammy Cowins was getting paid? He told him, no, I didn't tell him, but St. Louis DEA asked me if we needed to pay Tammy. And I told them they didn't need to pay her because DEA Atlanta was already taking care of that. Welby asked him, did you let DEA St. Louis know you were paying her on a monthly basis? He says, no. He says, did you tell DEA St. Louis that you were putting her in for an $80,000 award? He tells her no. Tells DEA St. Louis no. It's just not good, man. You know. And remember when we went over the Joanne Trogg, who was the other attorney that cross-examined Cromer, she mentions that there was never a truck in St. Louis. Remember we went over that? There was never a report. The truck was never found with drugs. There was never a report of a truck even being in St. Louis. So they're kind of implying that nothing of what Tammy Cowins and Keith Cromer said about August the 5th, 2012 ever even occurred. It never possibly, that's what the defense attorneys are implying, that none of that ever happened, that that's all made up. Stephen Welby, did you tell DEA St. Louis that on Sunday, August the 5th, 2012, that Frederick Swoop, Special Agent Swoop, was going to put in an award for Tammy Cowins for $80,000 on the exact same day that you called the DEA and told them about this phone call between Suarez and Cuffy? Keith Cromer, no sir. We didn't know we were going to get the phone call. It happened that day. I'm out of town. I don't know if on that day, if I look back in my records, I don't even know if I had even spoken to Special Agent Swoop on August the 5th. Stephen Welby. So you're saying it's just a coincidence that for some reason on a Sunday in the middle of the summer, Special Agent Swoop fills out a form for an $80,000 award for Tammy Cowins? Keith Cromer. We had talked about that before, prior to August the 5th, 2012. Stephen Welby, did you advise the agents in St. Louis at any time prior to August the 28th of 2012 that Tammy Cowins was being put in for an $80,000 award? Keith Cromer, no sir. The only thing I told them, they asked me what kind of, I said they were working for financial compensation. Stephen Welby. Mr. Cromer, you told Mr. Herman, that Tammy Cowins is a liar. Do you recall that? Keith Cromer. Tammy Cowins? The answer is yes. But Tammy Cowins did not lie until after Cuffy and his associates were arrested. That's when she lied. Everything she told while that investigation was going on was true and correct, and it could be corroborated, and that those events happened. Her story, her testimony doesn't change until after they get arrested, because Stephen Welby interrupts him. You're going to tell us why she became a liar? Is that what you're about to do? Keith Cromer, I believe I understand why. Mr. Welby, Your Honor, I ask that answer be prohibited as speculation. The judge, I will agree, I'll sustain. Stephen Welby, Mr. Cromer, you testified page 161 of 192. You testified previously that Tammy Cowins was supposed to receive, that she was going to broker a deal between Suarez and Gatlin, and that she was supposed to obtain a cut of that money for Demetrius Flannery, Big Meech. Keith Cromer, okay, I didn't say she had brokered the deal. I said she was supposed to. Big Meech, the person in jail, he brokered the deal between Fidel and Cuff. He bridged that gap between them. And what Big Meech had instructed, what the guy in prison had instructed Tammy Cowins to do, was after the successful sale of the drugs, they were supposed to give her a portion of the proceeds derived from the sale of those drugs, I guess as a finder's fee for Big Meech. And so at that point, once she told us that information about him, Big Meech became a co-conspirator in that scheme to possess with the intent to distribute drugs at that time. Stephen Welby. Would it surprise you if she has denied ever participating in any such thing and told us that you were the one that suggested saying that to the agents in St. Louis? Keith Cromer. I don't know how. I don't even know how you can believe that when I'm telling you. I don't even know which one of these defendants is Cuff. I don't even know what he looks like. I don't know a phone number. I don't know anything about him at all. Now, this is, remember, after Cuffy and them get arrested in 2013, this is when Tammy Cowins does change her whole story. Remember, she writes these other two handwritten affidavits and starts sending them to everybody. Cuffy's prior attorney, to the assistant U.S. attorney in St. Louis. You know, she begins to get afraid because now her name has showed up in Discovery. So who knows if Tammy Cowins and Keith Cromer are both telling the truth? Who knows if Keith Cromer and Tammy Cowins are both lying? But what we do know is that they are giving conflicting stories about critical events related to the application for the Title III wiretaps and for the affidavit, and that one of them is lying and perjuring themselves, and the other one could be telling the truth about a specific event and then lie about another event. It's just a misapplication of justice, man. It's just a perversion of the judicial process with what went on in this case. And this is why I think Cuffy needs a review of his case, man, because this is just so wrong, man. Peace.